You're moving the date. That's the end of it. My father said it like a verdict. He didn't ask. He instructed. He kept his voice flat on purpose. The venue manager copied me on an email. Conflicting instructions from Diane, he wrote. Barton Creek had our signed contract. 200 guests had saved the 18th of October 2025. My mother was trying to pull it apart anyway. I called her. No answer. I called my father. Voicemail. I texted Claire. Read, then nothing. I looked for one person to say stop. No one did. That's when I understood. They weren't angry. They were checking if I still obeyed. If you've ever heard for your own good used like a leash, stay with me. I'm Emily, 31, in Austin, Texas. I was engaged to Mark, and we were 8 days from our wedding. He proposed in late 2023 at Zilker Park. Small, warm, no performance. I thought that meant my life was finally mine. My parents are Lawrence and Diane. They told me they supported the wedding. They also reminded me about a family wedding fund. $120,000 my grandparents left for the first grandchild to marry. They spoke as if it was a gift they could grant or remove, not something tied to my name. In April 2024, I booked Barton Creek. Contract signed, deposits paid. I locked the date, the 18th of October, 2025. Near 200 guests saved it. Flights were bought, time off was approved. It wasn't a dream. It was logistics. Claire, my younger sister, never did logistics. She did a camera angle. She was the princess, an influencer my parents funded like a family project. Her career was treated like the family's future. In July 2025, my mother texted, "Call me. Urgent." About the wedding. When I called, she went straight to Claire. Claire had booked a retreat and travel that overlapped my wedding week. My mother said it like I had double booked them. "You'll move your wedding," Diane said. No apology. No pause. I said, "No." One word. Calm. Lawrence joined the call. "Don't be selfish," he said. Then the phrase he always used when I refused. "Learn humility." I remember that exact tone. I listed the costs. Change fees, vendor penalties, guest schedules, 2 years of work. My mother ignored the numbers. She went for shame. "Family comes first," she said. Then, softer, "For your future," as if my future belonged to her. 2 days later, we met in person. They arrived together, like a board meeting. Lawrence said, "Move it to 2026. Diane added, "We'll cover the change fees. Then, you will apologize to Claire," I asked. "For what?" Lawrence said. "For hurting her." He meant for not yielding. I felt myself go quiet. I wasn't numb. I was compressing. "I'm not moving it," I said. "I'm not apologizing. It's my wedding." My mother didn't blink. "You'll thank us later," she said. "For your future." Again, I walked out before my voice broke. In the car, my hands shook. Not from fear, from the effort of staying controlled. The next morning, Lawrence texted. They were cutting support. I would get none of the wedding fund. "This wedding isn't worthy," he wrote. Then, "You need to learn humility." That was their first punishment. The second was silence. For 47 days, they acted like I didn't exist. No calls, no replies. I sent short texts anyway. "I'd like to talk. I want you there." I hated that I needed it. I sent them. During that same stretch, Claire posted nonstop. Packing, resorts, work trip captions. My parents liked every post. "Proud of you. Beautiful." They were loud for her. They were absent for me. Sometimes I wondered if I was overreacting. They were older. They believed in obedience. Maybe this was just how they loved. Then I remembered my father's words. Learn humility. Love wasn't supposed to sound like that. In early September, Diane called. Her voice was calm, almost bored. "We'll attend," she said. "But no photos. No contribution. And you'll pay the price for your choice." I said, "Okay." A pause. Then she hung up. I tried to tell myself that was enough. They would show up, sit down, keep quiet. We could survive one day. Then the venue manager emailed again. 8 days before the wedding, he wrote that Diane had given conflicting direction. He asked me to confirm in writing that we were not moving the event. I called him. He said Diane had contacted the venue 3 times, not to congratulate me, to ask about rescheduling, cancellation, and pausing the wedding over family concerns. My stomach went cold. This wasn't disapproval anymore. It was interference. I showed Mark the email. He listened without comment. Then he said, "We stopped guessing. That week, every phone call felt like a test. Florist asked for final numbers. Caterer wanted the seating plan. My phone buzzed, and my body braced as if it might be them. Mark kept doing small things. He forwarded invoices into one folder. He printed the contract and highlighted the cancellation terms. He said, "If anyone calls pretending to be you, the venue needs a password." I hadn't thought of that. I was still thinking like a daughter, not like a client. I told him, "I don't want a war." He said, "Then we won't start one." He looked at me and added, "But we won't be naive." I remembered other times, college decisions, job offers. Anytime I stepped out of their plan, I heard the same line. "For your future." And then the follow-up, "Learn humility." They never changed the words. They just changed the setting. And that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how normal it sounded in my head, like I was trained to accept it. I went to bed that night and stared at the ceiling. 8 days. I told myself, just get to the date. Then another thought came in, quiet and sharp. What if they don't just sit in the back? What if they try to make sure the day never happens? And in that moment, I made my first clean decision. I stopped trying to earn my parents' approval. I started protecting my own life. If your parents ever used silence as discipline, you'll recognize what that does to a grown child. After that email, I asked the venue to lock everything down. Password on the account. No changes without my written approval. The manager didn't sound surprised. He sounded relieved. I drove to my parents' house once. I didn't go in. I sat in the car and watched their porch light. I told myself I was being dramatic. Then I remembered my mother calling the venue behind my back. 3 times. That wasn't drama. That was planning. I kept hearing the same line in my head. For your future. It was always the excuse. It was also always the weapon. And that still didn't feel like enough to justify what she was doing. So my mind did what it always did. It tried to make them reasonable. Maybe they were scared of being judged. Maybe they thought a wedding should include the whole family. Maybe they believed Claire's trip was a real career requirement. Maybe I was too rigid. Maybe. I let the maybes pile up because it was easier than anger. Then Mark asked me to sit down. He had his laptop open. His voice was steady. "I need to tell you something," he said. I waited for a fight. He didn't bring one. He said, "When your dad cut the fund, I checked the paperwork." He said it like he was admitting a small rule break. I didn't stop him. Mark explained that he had quietly requested the fund terms. He didn't call my parents. He didn't threaten them. He just wanted to know if they could legally hold money that was meant for me. He said, "I needed facts, not feelings." I felt shame rise in my chest. A trained reflex, like I had done something wrong by letting him protect me. I pushed it down. He turned the screen toward me. Bank statements. A transaction line. Date, the 18th of July, 2025. Amount, $80,000. From the wedding fund. To Claire. There was a note on the transfer. Something like, advance allocation. Claire wasn't engaged. Claire didn't have a wedding. Claire had a retreat and a trip. For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. Not because I was shocked by Claire, because I was shocked by my parents' calm. They had already taken what was meant for me. Then they asked me to move my wedding for the family. It wasn't concern. It was cover. I heard my father again. Learn humility. He wasn't teaching a virtue. He was teaching surrender. I asked Mark, "How did you get this?" He said he followed the trail. The fund had terms in writing. It stated the money was intended for me as the first to marry. My parents were managers, not owners. Mark said it carefully, like he didn't want to inflame me. But the message was plain. They had used the role of manager as a loophole. They had pulled $80,000 out. They had sent it to my sister. Then they tried to force me to change my date so their story would look clean. so I would be the selfish one. So they could say, we tried to guide her. So they could keep their faces. And that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how familiar it felt. Not the money. The structure. Claire gets the benefit. I get the lesson. Claire gets praise. I get humility. If you've ever watched favoritism get dressed up as morality, you're not alone. I sat back in my chair. I thought about the coffee shop meeting. My mother's soft voice. You'll thank us later. My father's flat one. This wedding isn't worthy. They weren't punishing me for refusing to move the date. They were punishing me for refusing to help them justify what they'd already done. I asked myself, quietly, the question I didn't want. Was I the problem for wanting the fund used as promised? Was I being petty about money? Was I being ungrateful? The thought lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then I pictured Claire's posts, the resorts, the new outfits, my parents' comments, proud of you. It wasn't subtle. It was deliberate. I called Diane, straight to voicemail. I called Lawrence. Voicemail. I texted, we need to talk today. No response. I wanted to scream. I didn't. I wrote a list instead. What I knew, what I could prove, what I still needed. Mark said, we document everything from now on. He wasn't excited. He wasn't vengeful. He was focused. That focus steadied me. We saved the venue emails. We saved the texts. We saved my father's line about not worthy. We saved the fund statements. We saved the fund terms, Mark said. We don't argue with them. We show reality. A week earlier, I would have begged my parents to explain. Now I understood they wouldn't. Explanation would cost them control. I still had moments of doubt. I'd wake up and think, maybe I should just move it. Maybe I should just let them have the money. Maybe peace is worth it. Then I'd remember the venue email. My mother trying to cancel my wedding without telling me. Peace wasn't what they wanted. Compliance was. I told Mark, they'll come and act innocent. He said, let them. Then he added, but we decide what happens next. That sentence was new in my body. We decide, not they decide. 3 days later, Diane texted me one line. Don't embarrass the family. No apology. No answer about the venue. Just a warning. I read it twice. Then I felt my hands go steady. I finally understood what mattered to them. Not my happiness. Not my marriage. Their image. I replied, I'm not moving the wedding. That's final. No emotion. No extra words. She didn't respond, but the silence had changed. It no longer felt like abandonment. It felt like strategy, and strategies can be met. We were 8 days out. I knew they might show up. I knew they might not. I knew they might try to twist the story in front of other people, so I made a second decision. I stopped hoping the day would go smoothly. I started preparing for it to go honestly. If you've ever been warned not to embarrass the family, you'll understand what came next. The week of the wedding moved like a tight hallway. I did my hair trial. I confirmed the seating chart. I smiled when people asked, are you excited? I said yes, because it was simpler than explaining. The night before, Mark spread papers across our dining table. Statements, emails, screenshots, the fund terms that named me. The transfer dated the 18th of July, 2025. The venue email about my mother's calls, my father's texts. Not worthy. Learn humility. Claire's posts, with my parents' public praise. Mark wasn't building a spectacle. He was building a record. He said, if they try to rewrite this, they can't. I nodded. My throat felt tight, but my voice stayed even. Okay, I said. That was my new word. Okay. Then action. I slept a few hours. I woke up before my alarm and stared at the dark. I thought about calling my mother one last time. Then I remembered her trying to cancel the wedding quietly. I put the phone down. On the 18th of October, 2025, Barton Creek looked exactly like it was supposed to. Chairs aligned, flowers placed, guests arriving in small clusters, hugs, laughter, people taking pictures. It almost made me forget there was a problem. Then my parents walked in. They came together. They didn't look lost. They looked prepared. Lawrence scanned the room as if he was checking his work. Diane kept her face neutral. No smile. No tears. No warmth. They sat in the far back corner. Not the front. Not the second row. The back, like strangers. And the 2 front row seats on my side stayed empty. Everyone saw it. People pretended not to, but I could feel the eyes. I told myself, don't react. Give them nothing. I watched my hands. I kept them still. A friend of mine, an older woman I've known for years, squeezed my arm. She didn't ask questions. She just said, I'm here. That was enough. If you've ever been forced to stand tall while your own family tries to shrink you, you know that feeling. When the ceremony started, I walked down the aisle, not with my father, with another relative who offered his arm without conditions. I didn't make a speech about it. I just did it. I looked at Mark at the front. He didn't look angry. He looked steady. That steadiness held me. The officiant spoke. The words were standard. Love, commitment, support. I listened and felt something strange. Relief. Because none of it required my parents' approval. Then came the moment I didn't expect to matter. The question, if anyone objects, speak now. It's usually a formality, a pause for a laugh, a tradition that never gets used. Lawrence stood up. He didn't clear his throat. He didn't hesitate. He said, loud enough for the room. We won't be part of this. He called me selfish. He said I had humiliated the family. He used the phrase like a stamp. No humility. No one stopped him. No one corrected him. Diane stood with him. She didn't look at me. She looked at the guests, like she was watching for their reaction. Then Lawrence grabbed her arm and walked out, straight down the aisle, past the flowers, past the people who had flown in to celebrate me. He didn't lower his voice once. The room went silent in a way I could feel in my teeth. I didn't cry. I didn't chase them. I didn't explain. I turned back to Mark. He held my gaze. The officiant looked at me, unsure. I said, continue. Just that. Continue. And we did. We said our vows. We exchanged rings. We made our promises in front of the people who stayed. The silence slowly filled back in, not with noise, with breath. After, people hugged me carefully. Some looked angry on my behalf. Some looked confused. A few looked like they wanted to defend my parents. I didn't give them an opening. I thanked them and moved on. In the bridal suite, I sat for a minute alone. My makeup was intact. My hands were still. But something inside me had clicked into place. My parents didn't want to attend and keep their disapproval private. They wanted to punish me in public. They wanted witnesses. They wanted to teach me, one more time, who had the power. I remembered Diane's line, "You'll pay the price for your choice." This was the price she meant. I walked into the reception and smiled. Not because I felt fine, because I refused to be dragged down. Claire wasn't there. Of course she wasn't. Her trip was for her career. My parents had chosen it over me without even pretending otherwise. As the first dances started, the room tried to reset. People wanted joy to win. I wanted that too, but I could feel the tension under every conversation, like everyone was waiting for the next thing. Mark leaned close and said, "When you're ready." He didn't say what he meant. He didn't have to. I nodded once. That was my irreversible realization. If I stayed quiet, they would keep doing it. Silence would become permission, and permission would become the rest of my life. On the way to the reception, an aunt I barely know stopped me. She whispered, "They're your parents. Give them time." Her voice held that familiar pressure. I looked at her and said, "They had time." Then I walked past her. Another guest, a friend of my mother's, avoided my eyes. She spoke to Mark instead, as if I was the problem to be managed. I watched that happen and felt a quiet anger settle in. Not hot, cold and clear. For a moment, I asked myself the question that always shows up. Am I too sensitive? Is this just a strict old-school family? Would a good daughter swallow it and smile? I didn't answer. I just replayed the facts. 3 calls to the venue. A fund transfer. 47 days of silence. A public walkout. Strict doesn't cover that. Back at our table, my phone buzzed once. A text from Diane. "Do not contact us again until you're ready to apologize." I read it, then put the phone face down. No shaking this time, just a heavy calm. Part 4. The reception started the way receptions start. Food, glasses clinking, people trying to act normal. But nothing was normal. There were 2 empty seats in the front row that everyone had seen. There was a walkout in the middle of my ceremony that no one could unsee. And there was the quiet question sitting in the room. What did Emily do to make her parents leave? I let people wonder for a while, not as a tactic. As a necessity, I needed 10 minutes to be a bride instead of a case. Then Mark touched my hand and stood. He didn't grab a microphone like a performer. He asked the DJ for the screen. He said, "I'm going to show something." His voice stayed calm. He looked around the room once, then he looked at me. He waited for my nod. I gave it. The first slide was simple. A screenshot of the fun terms. The line about the first grandchild to marry. My name, Emily. The next slide was a bank statement. Date, the 18th of July, 2025. Transfer, $80,000. Recipient, Claire. You could hear people stop breathing. Not gasps. A hush that spread across tables. Mark said one sentence. This was taken from Emily's wedding fund. He didn't add insults. He didn't add feelings. He let the numbers sit there. Then he showed the venue email. Conflicting instructions from Diane. 3 attempts to cancel or move the event. In writing. He didn't linger. He didn't build suspense. He moved straight through, like a report. My father's text came next. This wedding isn't worthy. Then, learn humility. A few people looked down. A few looked straight at me, suddenly understanding. Some looked furious. Some looked embarrassed, like they'd been tricked into judging me. And then Claire's posts appeared. Resort photos, shopping clips, captions about a retreat. My parents' comments under them. Proud of you. Hearts. Praise. The room didn't explode. It tightened. Someone at the back said, "Oh my God." Another voice, older, said, "That's theft." Someone else said, "They tried to cancel her wedding?" Each sentence was short. No one needed a speech. Mark finished with one line. "We didn't want to do this, but we won't let lies stand in this room." Then he sat back down. I didn't stand to explain myself. I didn't cry. I didn't ask for sympathy. I let the truth do what it does. It changed the air. For a minute, no one moved. Then people started turning toward each other, whispering, checking their phones, looking toward the doors my parents had used. My parents weren't there to defend themselves. They had chosen the dramatic exit. Now they didn't get to control the story. An older cousin walked over to me. He said, "I'm sorry." That was all. He looked shaken. A friend of my father's avoided my table completely. My mother's neighbor stared at the floor like she wanted to disappear. I watched it without satisfaction. I didn't feel victorious. I felt exposed. But it was a clean kind of exposure, the kind that ends a long lie. Later, when the music started again, the party returned in pieces. People danced because they didn't know what else to do. I danced with Mark because I still wanted to be married, not because the night was easy, because I refused to let them own it. At the end of the night, I went back to our hotel room and took off my shoes. My feet hurt, my chest hurt, but my mind was quiet for the first time in weeks. The next days were not loud. They were administrative. Mark and I met with a lawyer, not for revenge, for correction. My parents had managed a fund with written terms. They had moved $80,000 out of it to Claire. We had statements, terms, a clear trail. Lawrence tried to call once. Then Diane. Their voices sounded different. Not softer, just careful, like they were speaking to a room again. They said they had reasons. They said they were protecting the family. They said I had forced their hand. I didn't argue. I asked for everything in writing. They didn't like that. The lawyer handled the process. It wasn't cinematic. It was paperwork and deadlines. It was proof. It was consequences. In the end, my parents had to return the full amount they had taken. They also paid compensation as part of resolving their misuse of the fund. They signed a written apology. Not a heartfelt one, a written one. Claire stopped posting for a while. Then she came back with neutral content. No mention of the transfer. No mention of the wedding. No mention of me. That was her way. My parents tried a different angle. They sent messages about moving forward. They used the old language again. Because we love you. For your future. I read those words and felt nothing. The phrase had finally lost its power. I sent one message back. Short. We will speak when you can respect my boundaries. No debate. No bargaining. A few relatives tried to mediate. They called me and said, "They're still your parents." They said, "They made a mistake." They said, "Don't hold it against them forever." I listened. Then I asked one question. Did they admit what they did? Most of them went quiet. That answer told me everything. One person said, "Maybe they thought Claire needed it more." I didn't argue. I just said, "They could have asked." They didn't. Silence again. My parents also tried to reframe the wedding day. They told people they left because I was disrespectful. They told people I was ungrateful. They didn't mention the fund. They didn't mention the venue calls. They were still trying to edit me into the villain. But now the room had seen the slides. People had screenshots. The story didn't stay under their control. And for the first time, I didn't rush to fix it. I let their reputation crack where they had earned it. I kept my own voice low. I didn't need to be loud to be clear. If you've ever had to choose between keeping peace and keeping yourself, I think you know which one costs more. Months later, Mark and I bought a house, not a showpiece, a place with a quiet street and enough space to breathe. We also started preparing for his daughter to live with us. She was 8. She had a small suitcase and careful eyes. She was coming from his previous marriage. There was nothing dramatic about it, just a child watching adults, learning what rules exist. I didn't tell her my family history. She didn't need it, but I watched myself around her. Because kids notice tone. They notice who gets heard. They notice who gets overruled for their own good. If you've ever worried about what children learn from the adults who control the room, you'll understand why I didn't soften anything anymore. There are days I still feel the old pull. A birthday, a holiday, a family photo online. My body remembers the rule. Fix it, smooth it, make it look fine. Then my mind catches up. Looking fine was never the same as being safe. When invitations come for extended family gatherings, I answer with one sentence. "Thank you, we won't be there." No explanation. Explanations were always used against me. Sometimes Diane sends a message that ends with, "Because we're family." I don't respond. I read it once, then I archive it. Not out of spite, out of practice. Mark doesn't push me to reconcile. He also doesn't push me to cut them off forever. He lets me decide the distance. That's the point. When his daughter laughs in the kitchen, I listen. When she corrects Mark on a small detail, I watch him take it seriously. When she says no, and it's respected, I feel something settle. This is how a home teaches dignity, not with speeches, with behavior. My parents wanted to return as the good parents. They wanted the picture back. They didn't want the boundary. They wanted to be close without changing. That's not closeness. That's access. So I keep the line where it belongs. My parents reached out after the written apology. They tried to sound casual, like the last year was a misunderstanding. Diane wrote, "We should have dinner." Lawrence wrote, "Let's put this behind us." They didn't ask how I was. They didn't ask how the wedding felt. They didn't ask what it did to me. They asked for access. That difference mattered. I replied once, "We can talk by phone. No surprises. No unannounced visits. No comments about my marriage. No comments about Claire's career. And no more for your future as a reason to control me." Lawrence called the next day. He started with a sigh. He said, "We're your parents." I said yes. He waited for me to fold. I didn't. He tried the old road. "You need to learn humility," he said. He said it out of habit. Then he stopped, as if he realized the spell didn't work anymore. I said, "That phrase is done. You used it while you took from me. You used it while you tried to cancel my wedding. You used it when you walked out in front of 200 people. I don't accept it as love." There was a long pause. He said, "You're making this bigger than it was." I said, "No, you made it as big as it is." Diane got on the line. Her voice went soft. "We were trying to protect the family," she said. I said, "You were protecting your image. You chose Claire. You chose control. Now you live with that." They wanted me to argue. I didn't. I ended the call when it started looping. After that, they sent a few more messages. One said they missed me. One said they missed how close we used to be. I didn't correct it. We were never close. I was compliant. Claire never contacted me about the money. Not once. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She posted a photo weeks later with a neutral caption about new beginnings. My parents liked it. Some patterns don't break. They just get quieter. At home, Mark's daughter started settling in. We made a routine. Homework at the kitchen table, dinner at the same time. A small lamp on in the hallway at night. Nothing grand, just steady. One evening she asked, "Do your parents live nearby?" I said, "Yes." She asked, "Do they come over?" I said, "Not right now." She looked at me for a second. Then she nodded like she understood something adults don't always notice. She went back to her drawing. Later, Mark said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yes." And I meant it. Because my boundary wasn't a performance. It was a structure. It was what kept our home from becoming another stage. My parents tried once to show up unannounced. They didn't get inside. I didn't open the door. I spoke through it. "Call first," I said. Then I stepped back. No lecture. No fight. Just a line. They stood on the porch for a minute. Then they left. I watched their car turn the corner. My heart didn't race. It just beat. Some relatives still think I went too far. They say, "But they paid it back." They say, "But they apologized." They say, "They're from a different generation." I let them think it. I don't debate it. The payment fixed the money. The apology fixed the paperwork. Neither fixed the instinct. I don't hate my parents. I don't romanticize them either. They are who they have been for a long time. Lawrence believes respect is obedience. Diane believes control is care. Claire believes the world exists to watch her. I believe something else now. I believe a grown woman can keep her dignity without permission. On a quiet morning, I walked through our living room. There were moving boxes still stacked by the wall. Mark's daughter's backpack leaned against a chair. My wedding photo sat on a shelf. Not the ceremony. Not the walkout. Just Mark and me, standing close, looking straight at the camera. I looked at it for a moment. Then I turned off the light and went to make coffee.